One of the things that I can do is in any market, especially in PPM markets, I can punch around Los Angeles, and everyone seems to be in commercials at the very same time. Nobody's playing music. So we're here talking about the beyond the bow tie. I mean, does this concept really work? Should we be counter-programming each other despite what the best practices are from PPM? Justin?
I think there's still value in the idea of straddling the quarter hours to maximize your AQH. But I think that it's really, I think you have to look at this strategically and look at your competition. I think you have to look at what they're doing to see if that strategy works. I mean, obviously everybody's doing 12 and 42. That's the, where everybody seems to put them. And 12 and 42 is easier than the other straddle time periods, which is 27 and 57. If you could pull that off, I think that's probably your better bet. Because obviously your competition will most likely be in the stop sets at 12 and 42. The problem with that is traffic department has an issue sometimes of making that work with spots running over the top of the hour. But I think you also have to look at it tactically. And I drove when I was a day-to-day PD, I drove my traffic directors crazy because I was always moving stop sets around. And I would like to use some Nielsen data and find out what the routines are of the current panel at this moment. And remember, it always changes because every single month your panel changes by 10%. So the routines of your P1s today are not necessarily the routines of your P1 6 months from now. So just as a quick example, when I was looking at this, and I look at things quarter hour by quarter hour basis, and I found that in Vegas on a country station, the biggest time period on the weekend was at 12 noon. And I couldn't figure out why. I said, well, maybe because people are just getting out of church at that time. And so I tactically removed the number one tune-out factor, which is commercials at that time. And we saw a little bump on the weekends just because of that little move. So you have to look at it strategically and tactically.
Bren?
Can I just see a show of hands of how many people are PPM market? And how many people are diary market? Okay, so about half and half. The 12 and 42 is obviously more of a PPM strategy, I think, than a diary strategy because of the way PPM works. The fact of the matter is, if Nielsen would find a way to give us credit for constantly flowing quarter hours instead of the hard quarter hours, this problem would go away, Joel, with everybody playing stop sets at the same time and listeners going to Pandora and Spotify while everybody else is in spots, which is what's going on. Because you're not going to sit there and listen to all these commercials time after time after time, and especially with the connected car, which the Jacobs guys are going to get into a little bit later, where your options are just at the punch of a button. We have kind of a problem here with everybody stopping down at the same time, in my opinion. So the only way I can think of to really prevent that right now is to try stop sets away from the competition, see if that moves the needle a little bit more than having the philosophy of 12 and 42 all the time. But the cool thing about PPM is you can find out the results the next month, the next 2 months, the next 3 months. So try it someplace else and see if that works for you. But I would really like to just kind of talk about the Nielsen thing one more time. Is those hard quarter hours were put into place, when we were keeping track of Jack Benny and the Lone Ranger on the radio. Those really need to go away. And why shouldn't I should be able to get credit for 5 minutes between 5 after and 20 after. But if I only have 3 minutes of listening in the first quarter hour and 2 minutes right after that in the second quarter hour, guess how many quarter hours credit I get?
Zero.
So I don't know if I answered the question or not. But
you kind of did, but I mean, that also gets into that argument of like, should we have forget quarter hours altogether and just have actual listening? But the
right.
Proof says there that the numbers will compress them even further. So because everybody also on the converse side of that thing gets a bump from time to time for less listening, but they get the entire quarter hour. So,
well, again, I think you have to look at it strategically and look at your competitive situation. For example, if you're the big cuming mass appeal station in the market, straddling of the quarter hours situation, I think, is your best bet. But if you're a relatively new brand, you have a low cum, you're the second or third choice in the market. If I were you, I would be placing those stop sets when your competitors are in music and vice versa. You want to be playing music. When they switch to you as their second choice, you want to be in music.
Have you discussed that thing with Nielsen? Have you discussed that with Nielsen?
Not yet, but the time is near.
Sounds like it's time.
I was practicing my rant here, and
we like it. We like it. Good rant. Good rant. It's time for change. When PPM first launched, many music stations reduced the amount of personality talk. That talk is bad, and they just want to hear the music. Well, now we kind of know from experience that the importance of a personality is what makes you different from everything else that's out there on the streaming varieties, and in fact your direct competition, because they continue to have an emotional attachment to your personality. So in this day and age where in PPM markets, afternoon drive sometimes cumes as much, if not more, the morning drive at this point, is there now some kind of a rule of thumb when it comes to the amount of music compared to talk in morning drive and other day parts? Patty, maybe you can address that.
Well, I'm going to be contrary because I play my spot sets at the top and the bottom of the hour, and I never moved them on cue. So I'm going to also say that I have a very talky afternoon show and a very talky morning show that plays 4 songs, and they're number 1 in the market, and the afternoon show talks, and they're number 1 in the market. I will say no pain, no gain. You got to get there, and it's sometimes painful getting there. Trying to find personalities that are willing to share their life and are connecting with your listeners is not easy. But then again, if it was easy, it wouldn't be as much fun.
That's right.
That's right. And they wouldn't pay us. And it wouldn't be that much fun. So I'm a believer in investing in the talent and taking the time and having a talent coach. There's a lot of really good talent coaches out there that you can learn from. If you're a program director and you're just getting started, get yourself a good talent coach and learn from them and become a great talent coach. Because at the end of the day, that's what's going to keep people coming back. Or it's, I'm going to start to say this, in my personal opinion, that is what gets them coming back, because they can get the new Rihanna song. Let's just list the ways, right? And they can do it without your imaging and without your commercials and in so many different ways. So it's that person that they connect to, I think, that keeps them coming back to you every day.
I have a little audio example of that with the talent in just a second, but I want to preface it by saying a while back I asked my morning show, if I gave you $1 for every listener that we had at the start of the stop set to come back at the end of the stop set, what would you say before going into that stop set or going into that song? What would you say if I gave you $1 for every listener that hung around or came back right after the stop set? I had one person at Mix in Milwaukee run with that, and I'd like to play an audio example of what she now does almost every break. And this isn't a best of, just so you know. You can tell by the content. These are I picked up some today and yesterday, so this is not a best of.
99.1 The Mix, Wes and Elizabeth.
Ever daydream about those hot Hollywood couples a little bit?
About him, croaking and me being her, yes, absolutely had that daydream.
One of the hot Hollywood couples have to schedule when they get it on. That's not very hot. I'll tell you about after Carmen on The Mix. Can you not play the game? And here's my question. Why did somebody even think about playing it there? That's next. It's been is coming up next. Let me ask you, this sounds familiar. You and your man go out, have a couple drinks, there's an argument, and she throws your phone into the water.
Ooh.
What celebrity had that happen at the end of her birthday party?
Whoops.
Drama. And what could have been on his phone?
Oh, boy.
I'll tell you about it next after Adele. It's The Mix.
99.1 The Mix, Wes and Elizabeth.
You ever do something in public that maybe should be done when you're all alone in a room and no one can see?
Yes. Yes.
Happened to me yesterday.
Now I can't go near school.
And a 6-year-old Bill saw this. I'll tell you all about it next on The Mix.
Good stuff.
So I mean, that's some of the stuff this is doing now. She could do a whole hour on teases because she's the best in our company as far as teasing and getting people to listen for the next quarter hour, and it works really, really, really well. So.
You know, I'll say this. Bruce and Caroline Beasley, my bosses, they just went to Appalachian State to speak to a bunch of students that are interested in communication and broadcasting, television, radio, media in general. And they asked the question, why do you like radio? Because obviously these kids in this room are people that are interested in media. And almost every single one of them said they had a connection, they grew up with a personality. And I think that personality and what I call internal content is everything for our business. And I think that, there are a lot of radio programmers and companies that may have overreacted a little bit to PPM and pulled back on content. And we're probably more focused on the length of a DJ's break than the quality of the break. And I think that we, as an industry, need to realize how important this, this internal content that our personalities, the storytelling that they do, and I think that we should give them the tools to hone that skill and be better at it. In the form, like you said, Patty, with talent coaches. I'm a big believer in talent coaches, and the reason why I am because when I was a day-to-day PD, I was horrible at coaching morning shows. That just wasn't a skill of mine, so I always leaned on people to help me with that. But I think it's so critically important, and I think that as program directors, it should be, priority number one to help your talent create great internal content.
And I think finding people who are willing to share their life on the air is so important. I mean, we went through a period of time in radio where consultants said, well, just here's your liner card. That's what you're supposed to say. Don't say anything else. Nobody wants to hear about your kids. Nobody wants to hear about your dog. Nobody wants to hear that. I recently had a talent leave my station, and he'd been there for 25 years. He was just such a great guy. I loved him. And he moved on to be a photographer for movies. And the young guy that I brought up to take his place, he and I are talking about the show, and I said, hey, I'm just curious why you didn't talk about the wedding that you went to this weekend. It was the first time that you showed up at the wedding with Toria, who's our traffic girl. So now you're kind of dating at work. And we had a great conversation before we went on the air about how hard it is to date somebody you work with. And I had suggested to him, that's a great on-air topic. You should, women would love to give you their advice on how this is a good or maybe bad idea. And he didn't do it. So the next day I said, well, why didn't you talk about it? He goes, well, I wasn't comfortable. I didn't know if my ex-girlfriend would hear it and feel like I was putting it up in her face. And, so I just didn't do it. And I said to him, well, you could keep thinking like that, or you could understand that sharing your life and telling stories like that connect you to the listener. It gives them something to talk to you about when they see you out. That you become a part of their life. They relate to you. It's a moment of vulnerability. And it makes you someone to them. Take that chance. Do it.
Very well said. And actually, it's the only type of content. I look at the 3 buckets of content for a morning show. Internal content, which you're describing, things that are about their lives, external content, pop culture, news, and fun and games, contests, things that we do as a radio station. But internal content is the only type of content that can't be duplicated. No one else can do it.
Yep.
It's what makes them unique.
I'd like to add to that too, in that everybody gets this kind of the same show prep sheet. So you just saying what's on the page, your listeners already have that. It's not the content, it's the content treatment. How is this person going to take that content and make it different, put a different angle on it? But the days of you getting on the air and reading straight content that's on the page are gone. the listeners already know that. They've already read TMZ or whatever it is. You have to put your own personal spin on it in order to make it interesting.